So now let's get to the big benefit of shifting to this new FPI regime, and that is doing away with SEBI registration, having to register with a DDP and doing KYC and all your transacting through that DDP. How will it simplify life for foreign investors?
I think it's a positive step if it works out the way we want it to work out, which is significantly reduce the cost of compliance. But I think the big question really is when they actually give effect to this through a bunch of new regulations for FPI. The question is it going to be, basically open, satisfy KYC norms, get your bank account and your DP account open, and then it's, life is happy and you can go ahead with your investments, and there's nothing more that's going to happen. It's going to be a hugely positive step. If, on the other hand, the FPI regulations effectively come out with something which mirrors, the ongoing requirements that we currently have in the SEBI regulations for FIIs, and then say that instead of SEBI, it's going to be primarily the DDP who's going to be monitoring it, then at some level it becomes old wine in a new bottle.
What do you think, Anand?
Overall, definitely positive. The only change to the point he made was in terms of documentation changes to the extent of the KYC relaxation post the risk categorization, which is now going to be permitted. There will be a benefit for those who would now come under the low risk and the medium risk.
KYC means the top two categories will benefit from fewer requirements under the KYC.
Absolutely.
Right. Okay,
and from an overall process standpoint, this has been a very oft received feedback from FII sub-accounts that besides the onerous documentation, the India entry process is anywhere between 3 to sometimes 6 months, and then time is money. And there are very often you have investors on the one hand which you have kind of mobilized, telling them you're going to launch an India-centric fund. In 2 months your fund will be ready. But then after 5 months you're still getting your licenses, the investors start getting worked up, right? So they wanted the time to market to India also to be crashed. Now that's a big plus, because by moving to the DDP registration process, I think that DDP already does the due diligence that he is currently doing, the custodian does today. Going forward, the DDP would do it. The due diligence process remains the same. We would do entirely exactly the same thing. Like they say, the strength of a chain depends on its weakest link. Here, if you look at the time to get your registration done and say that you can start trading from tomorrow, the task that takes the longest time is the PAN card obtaining, which if you take a 12-day period or let's say 2 weeks, that's now going to be your time to enter India. So from a 12 to 16 week to a 2 weeks, I think it's a big shift.
The fact that the exercise where the biggest bottleneck was SEBI as a regulator approving thousands of applications coming in, here you have a platform of DDPs. So you are essentially dividing the approval process amongst qualified DDPs, which should, I guess, result in a more efficiency of the entry.
I think to add just one thing, we've had practical experience that actually demonstrates the validity of the point that he made. Because if you look at RBI and authorized dealers, right, I think this is a great move along similar lines where effectively delegation is occurring. And at the end of the day, even if people are going to, in a worst case scenario, look at the same thing, one is hoping that they look at it faster.
Also, if you see the experience of the last 1 year on the QFI front,
the QDPs.
QDP and QFI front, it has helped a lot in terms of, making the process simpler for them to come in. It becomes relatively easier. And yes, QDP and now DDPs will obviously be there will be a challenge for them to tone up their KYC, the processes, etc.
The reason why, in fact, I'll interrupt you there is because the eligibility criteria for DDP has been strengthened versus what the criteria for QDP was. What were the concerns that led to that, and was that in effect to lead to more robust KYC?
Now that you're delegating the powers that the regulator earlier was doing, you would want to ensure that the benchmark...
But you were willing to delegate those powers to QDP just a few months ago.
Now you're delegating to the entire set of foreign investors, right, which is the larger set of categories of investors. So obviously you want to set the bar a little bit higher. Most
QDPs that exist today will not qualify as DDP.
Reportedly, the qualifications for a DDP, a lot of QDPs will find it tough to...
and this is not to critique the report, because I understand that the report is today at this point in time, but it's just the process. It's absurd. We just got 44 QDPs to sign up over the course of the last 1 year, 55. And now, 55, but if you take out all the double counting, I think, and now we're telling them, sorry, you may no longer have any sort of business being a QDP, you'd have to be a DDP. So I just find that disturbing to go back to the
And it clearly
top
gives
2
the
points.
global banks a competitive advantage, let's face it.
Is that how it works, the eligibility criteria? It gives the global banks an advantage?
No. How the non-global banks are going to react to it, is obvious as well.
This risk-based KYC, it makes life simpler for the first 2 categories. But interestingly, the third category will not be able to write P-notes and ODIs. Do you see that as a big restriction, or I think it's acceptable in the scheme of things?
I think the approach seems to be right, and in many sense, most of the sub-account structures, which were anyway prohibited by SEBI with effect from 2008 from issuing ODIs, are the ones which would typically fall under the category 3.
Which is the highest
Which
risk
I think would essentially mean will be a status quo as it exists today. That only qualified FIIs which are allowed will be allowed. So I honestly...
So as far as restrictions go, it's a status quo. As far as the top 2 categories, which is the low and the moderate risk categories go, it's a vast improvement because you do a far slimmer, leaner KYC.
And also, if what I've heard is correct, they are going to allow the DDPs to rely on the global custodians KYC norms, KYC fulfillment, and not do any further inquiries at the India level, which is a great help, because that was, I think, the demand of the industry to rely on the GCs, because they've already done a fair bit of KYC at their end.
Generally, it will be status quo for those who come under category 3. For all the others, there will be some benefit to the other, depending on which category they are in.
Where do hedge funds fall? Category 3.
Category 3.
Cool.
And in fact,
they're treated the same way today as category 3
honestly,
would be
I
treated.
think that could be a big challenge for hedge funds. If they are put as category 3, the biggest sensitivity for a hedge fund has been the LP disclosure and the KYC standards. Now, if I'm a category 3 with a much higher KYC standard and going to the ultimate beneficiary level, I think that can really cut out a large part of the market who may otherwise have been eligible today as a sub-account.
But shouldn't category 3 KYC in the FPI regime be equal to the KYC that we do today? Because only then will you see an improvement in category 2 and category 1 KYC.
The point is making is, if you don't have 20 plus investors, you don't have anybody, one single individual having more than 49%, whatever it is, then it's all fine. But if you have, even today, whichever way you come, you have to disclose the investor who holds more than 50%.
So life will not change for him.
So there's no change.
There's one other positive I want to bring up, and that is that if I understand correctly, the way FPI has been defined, it now allows for investors from those countries that are not on the negative list of what is that, Financial Action Task Force, FATF, right? Whereas QFI said only those investors who are on FATF's membership list are allowed in. So essentially you have expanded the number of countries from where investors can come in, and that is again another plus to what this committee reported. Do you agree with that, Amit?
In fact, this will open up the doors for investors coming in again to start coming in through the Mauritius route, because Mauritius
QFI did not allow Mauritius.
Under the QFI route, Mauritius was not permitted. So also several other countries. And if you see, I think only about 12 or 13 or 14 countries would get restricted. Countries like Pakistan, Indonesia.
I think it's a big one, because effectively what's happened is the QFI list was 45 countries.
Yeah.
We've actually moved
and did
to
not
85.
include Mauritius.
We moved to 85, and as he said, Mauritius is the big one, but you've also got Cayman, BVI, Guernsey,
yes, I was just going to bring up, you've also got Cayman, BVI,
all of whom have now made it
Jersey.
to the list.
This is all a plus from a QFI perspective that you're saying. So from an FII sub-account perspective, I think it's status quo.
Yeah, it's status quo. Sorry.
And
we're talking about the QFI kind of investors. For them it is a benefit. For FIs it's the same, right?
Correct. Yeah. And the fact that, QFIs you've not seen so much of interest, how much of a plus it is obviously the question. But yes, we are getting it at par.
The FII route had this dual status, right? FII was one which had to be with the IOSCO, the eligibility criteria was much stronger. There was no requirement for any of that for a sub-account. So today, I had an FII which was in a regulated country, my sub-account could have been in any part of the world, and it was not restricted. In some sense, by putting a list of jurisdictions here, you have actually narrowed it down. In the sense, I know it's a comprehensive list and hopefully it covers...
90% of everything come from Mauritius?
No, so I think...
Okay.